You're listening to The Devil's Advocate, where we talk about news and current events. I'm your host, Brandon Condict.
And I'm also your host, Mitchell Hernandez. Our goal at The Devil's Advocate is to provoke thought by introducing viewpoints and information that isn't readily available in the mainstream media.
It's in truth a conversation where an independent liberal, like myself,
and an independent conservative, like myself, can share different viewpoints without the typical disdain for one another we see all too often in politics. So with that, let's get started.
What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt? You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups. But not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
All right.
And we are back.
Week 2.
Well, not week 2.
Part 2, I guess.
Week
Right.
25. It is Saturday, August 19th, while we're shooting the Facebook Live segments here. And Charlottesville is obviously the talk of the week. So we've got Frank back with us this week. Obviously, last week we had some issues with the audio. And, you know, I had mentioned that we were going to do a guest a month, and I don't want to have the same issue every single time that I have Frank on or that I have somebody else on. So glad to have Frank back.
Yeah.
We're going to try to work out these kinks and see if we can get this audio where it needs to be. So
Right.
obviously we're going to, like I just mentioned, and obviously you just heard with the soundbite, Charlottesville is pretty much what everybody is talking about. And I think, you know, obviously we covered it last week, but I think we kind of looked at it because it was so fresh. We looked at it in the same way that we typically look at other topics, where the media coverage and this side versus that side and whatnot. But I think we kind of owe it to the story itself and to the show to kind of have the discussion about the freedom of speech aspect and, you know, what groups should or shouldn't be allowed to speak, and should they all be allowed to, or is there a line? You know, we'll go into all of that, but I guess let's go ahead and start with Donald Trump's comments. Donald Trump obviously came out Tuesday and said, here's the problem with what Donald Trump said in my mind. The problem with what Donald Trump said is the fact that every time somebody talked about the extreme right, he shot back very emotionally with, well, what about the alt left?
Right.
And I think that's a really that's not a really great way to
I think
present
almost
it.
any other president would go for the emotional, we don't tolerate the
Right.
loss of American life.
That's kinda
And
what-
he seemed to take it more political.
Yeah, that's what we're
Well, he-
used to seeing is people just
well, I mean,
condemn.
we're
and
used to
then-
seeing that from Trump, too, is Trump uses any
Yeah.
excuse to turn everything political.
Right.
Well,
Talk
and
to Boy Scouts.
I do think that I think the problem here, and I know some would disagree, but with where I have an issue with what Trump said, because let's be clear. Well, let's start off. Yeah, right. Let's start off though by saying, in no way does anyone on this panel support Nazis, defend Nazis.
We don't like Nazis.
We don't like Nazis. But we know that this is a very emotional time.
Right.
This is
I don't think
everybody's
there's a lot of disagreement among people that
what
fuck
except Nazis.
Except Nazis, yeah.
Right.
Which are
but I already know, and every one of us here already knows that when we get into this topic, the opportunity to call names and point fingers and incorrectly label people,
Right.
is very likely, and we're going to risk it anyway.
Right.
And because I think we owe it to ourselves and to you to have the conversation. So
Right.
I just want to get that out of the way because I already know what my comment section is going to look like once we're done with this.
all I heard was Brandon said he was a Nazi.
Right. I think that's exactly how
That's
I just
all I
said
heard.
I can cut that audio.
it. Right. Sometimes being crooked ain't so bad. So no, but so I think the problem is though with the way Trump handled it on Tuesday was that I think, even though I've heard some argue against it, that the president's job is to unite the country when something happens like this. I think when New York gets bombed on 9/11, if George Bush comes out and goes, yes, but they have valid grievances, that's not the right way to do that. Like, you have to come out
No.
and you have to do the here, let me feed the baby candy. We're all going to be okay. We're strong people.
Right.
We've been through these things before, and we will.
I mean, you kind of have to go super patriotic after any tragedy.
yeah.
That's the
do.
presidential playbook.
And I think that's where he really, really stepped in shit this
Yeah.
week.
I-
Is
see-
that he really he didn't attempt to unite people. Intentions are higher today because of his response.
Yeah. I see it from both ways. So I don't think that the president has an inherent job to unite the country whatsoever. I think his job is easier if he unites the country, but I don't think that that's his inherent role. I think when the president came out and said there is violence on both sides, he was correct.
I think he was
And I think-
factually correct.
Right.
I
but
think he was poorly timed.
But
Well, he didn't go hard enough against the
and
Nazis.
what
Yeah, if he had
did-
came out and said, like, screw the Nazis.
Yeah.
Well, and what he did was in the subsequent sentences, he goes on to draw what seems, and if it wasn't, then it needs to be better played,
Right.
seems like a moral equivalence. And there is not a moral equivalence to...
This is where we disagree. I
people-
think that there is a moral equivalence where there's violence. I think that you look at both of these, all these groups that were there, I think just because the KKK and neo-Nazis have been around longer, and we know them, we know what they're about violence and whatnot. I don't think that negates violence that we see on the other side.
No,
I think that if violence is the outcome,
violence, and
exactly.
you condemn it on all sides.
I don't-
Yes.
Whether you get there through anger
Where-
Right.
What I think he did, though, what I think it seems like he did, which it may be totally
Sweeping them under the rug
Well,
and-
maybe this may be fair and it may be completely unfair, but what I think where I think the argument of moral equivalence comes into is it seemed like where the line was drawn was the motivations of each group. It didn't seem like, because I think it's fair to condemn violence across the board. You should, and if you don't,
I don't care what your motivations
then you're
are.
probably one of those extremes.
If you get to that point where you
but
say,
it seems like he made a moral equivalence to the Klan's motives and the people who oppose the Klan's motives.
Right.
And one is clearly right and one is clearly wrong.
Yeah. Now, once you
Again-
get into them causing violence, they're both equally
They're
wrong.
both
But
equally
at the
wrong.
start of it, I definitely would have been on one side, and it would have
Yeah.
been anti-Nazi side, you know.
yeah, exactly.
But the moment the violence started, I would have got the hell out of there.
How many
Right.
times do you think we can drop that line in this episode? The anti-Nazi side. I would have been on the anti-Nazi side.
Well,
I just
name-
want to let you know I would have been on the left side.
Right.
of
Just
the
name
street.
this episode that to avoid any confusion.
right. We
Right.
don't like Nazis. Here we go.
But I think that is the issue with.
I think that that's cherry picking, though. I think that whenever they talk about, and again, that's what we keep hearing. Oh, well, Trump supporters are just, they're just picking and choosing. And they're trying to navigate through his words to say what he really meant. And again, that's what I'm about to do. I'm going to say that I think that he thought he was talking about the violence on both sides. I think what the left is doing, and what Republicans are doing as well, is saying, no, he's making a moral equivalency of Nazi propaganda with just anti-protesters. And no, I don't think that's what they're doing.
I don't think
they're
so
saying
either,
that,
but I still think he had a responsibility when he was cleaning
Yeah.
up the already not accepted statements. I'm not saying they weren't acceptable. I'm just saying they weren't
Yeah.
accepted.
Yeah.
That's why he was there, to say that, was to clean up what he
Yeah.
said on Saturday, which was the many sides comment.
Which I agree with. I think that he has a bigger obligation to, if you see that there's violence on both sides,
Yeah,
to call
that's
it out
fine,
on both
but
sides.
he already called it out on Saturday.
Yeah.
Which people didn't like. So his job at this moment was to be like,
well, to
guys,
clarify at that point.
right.
He didn't-
I don't
he
like
did
the
not
Klan.
clarify.
I don't like white supremacists. Those guys, I don't need your votes. That's
Yeah.
what he should have said, and he
He
should have
didn't
stopped.
say it.
And then when somebody said, like, he should not have been like, he shouldn't have gone. And the other thing too is, I think the Klan has hijacked the monument discussion.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really unfortunate for those people who actually care about the monuments as it's the story,
Right.
its own story,
Mhm.
and what those monuments are. I think now those white nationalists have found somewhere where they can go, this is our political motivation.
Right.
And so now we have a reason to get out there. We have a reason, and then they show up with torches and feelings
Well,
get
I think
really
it's
escalated.
important to, because like I was telling you guys before this, I watched a thing on One America News where they were sat down. I can't remember his name right now, which is bad on me. But the guy who organized the
It was
right,
something Kessler.
something like that,
can't
Unite the
remember
Right
his name.
protest. And basically what he was saying was that they had spent 2 months organizing this. There was a safety plan in place, and then 2 weeks before it was going to go down, they came in and said, we're pulling your permit. Of which then we saw the ACLU come in and step in and say, no, you don't have the right to do that. They have the right to organize just like everyone else.
Right.
And then they said, okay, well, we're not going to implement that safety program then. Originally, they were supposed to usher them in. The cops were supposed to go. And then on top of that, they get granted. So Donald Trump was wrong. Antifa, the anti-protesters, they had permits as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just for 1 block away. And to me, right there, you've just spelled trouble.
Yeah.
Like, you've got two people who have very different ideologies. We've already seen violence from both sides of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've just put them 2 blocks away and said the police aren't going to police the situation anymore. What the fuck are you doing?
And,
Right.
and it's not like it came out of nowhere. They had 2 months, and
Yeah.
they knew the counter protests were coming. And anybody could have seen this coming.
Right.
Well, we saw the
Absolutely.
things with Black Lives Matter posting on there saying this is when it's coming. We're going to organize and counter press this too, which they have the right to do.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but the police should also take that as okay. Well, let's make sure we have people working double shifts or
exactly
extra
that
staff.
we need to be able
I-
to police the situation.
I have a-
National Guard
I have
should
a
have
question.
probably
Yeah.
been there.
Do you guys think that like had that Trump or that comment Trump made been made by Obama or Bush? Like a violent act comes out, he comes out and says, "We need to condemn violence on both sides." Do you think it would have been as big a story?
No.
Or it's the fact that Trump has? I mean,
I
they're
don't-
going to
I
find
really don't
anything.
think
I mean,
so.
because
Yeah.
he's had
Yeah.
6 months of fiascos.
Okay, so I agree with that. I agree with you, Mitch.
Yeah.
And I also I agree with that sentiment that it had. I think here's the thing.
Worded differently, obviously.
Here's
but
the thing: Republicans have a bad history with being called racist, right? Like
Right.
it's because they have a bad history of being racist.
Well, I think we can argue that one.
So
here lately you're just calling everyone racist. Like,
Right, and I don't think that's fair at all. I'm saying, like, go back and look at 1960s Republican Party
Right.
and now talk to me about how they're not
it's
racist.
not the 1960s anymore.
No, I know. I'm saying they have a history. I'm not saying that's what they
Right,
are.
that's fine.
They have a history. So I think that if it was George Bush, it would have been easier. I think if it was Barack Obama that came out and said the same thing, it would not have been taken away.
You
that
think it
way.
would have been flipped
But-
and Republicans would have gotten mad?
Well, I think that the Tea
Yes,
Party
I
would have.
do.
I don't think that the general
I think
Or
Republicans
conservative-
would
just
have.
the polar, yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I
because
think
the Tea
far
Party
left, the
was,
far
was
right.
like, no, everything that Obama does is wrong.
I absolutely think conservative media would have jumped the shit on it.
oh, well, they
Like,
would have, yeah.
Absolutely.
Fox News would have.
Yeah.
And all of the Breitbarts and the Drudge Report.
Well, they
and
weren't even really
Blaze
big during
and-
Obama's time.
They became big during Obama's time.
Well, right at the end of it.
Because they had a black president to fight against.
I think that's simplifying it a little bit.
But I think but I wouldn't simplify it and say it's because it's Trump. It's because Trump has emboldened these people.
Yeah,
and
it's the
I don't-
history of his first 6 months
and
or
I
so
think
in office.
he's emboldened them for numbers purposes. Not, I don't think that he's like, man, I hope white supremacy is
Rises
the law
up.
of the land. I think that he's like, man, I hope that people vote for me.
Yes.
And this is an easy, and for that,
I think
though,
it's hard to argue that
but that
he's
is-
not doing that now.
right,
Because
and that
he doesn't
though,
disavow.
is completely wrong
It
for
is
the
wrong.
president of the United States
It
to
is.
do.
Especially in his first year of office to already be thinking about re-election. Like, how about you
Yeah.
focus on doing your job,
Right.
and then in 3 years,
To
worry
be
about
fair,
this?
every politician's going
I
to
mean,
do that.
fair,
you know?
fair, but yeah.
Before we get into the whole freedom of speech thing, because I already see this going that way, because I think that's the majority of the conversation, I want to read Mitt Romney's statement, because Mitt Romney's statement is how a president should have handled this.
Yeah, we'll read it.
And do you want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it.
I'll let you read
I
it.
did vote for Mitt Romney, so.
I'll let in the audience who's been with us for several episodes now knows exactly why I just handed that off to Mitch, because he is much better at reading stuff on
Well, with
this
this
microphone.
spider-veined phone here.
Yeah, well, you know what, dude? Sometimes phones hit driveways, and I can't help it.
I just can't help it. But, okay, so this is what Mitt Romney said. I guess this was... You want to take care of this? 'Cause-
Yes.
Yeah, this is annoying. Let's see. Mitt Romney came out yesterday, which would have been the 18th, in the early morning, and he said, I will dispense for now from discussion of the moral character of the president's Charlottesville statements. Whether he intended to or not, what he communicated caused racists to rejoice, minorities to weep, and the vast heart of America to mourn. His apologists strained to explain that he didn't mean what we heard. But what we heard is now the reality, and unless it is addressed by the president as such, with unprecedented candor and strength, there may commence an unraveling of our national fabric. The leaders of our branches of military service have spoken immediately and forcefully, repudiating the implications of the president's words. Why? In part because of the moral and commitment of our forces, made up and sustained by men and women of all races, could be in the balance. Our allies around the world are stunned and our enemies celebrate. America's ability to help secure a peaceful and prosperous world is diminished. And who would want to come to the aid of a country they perceive as racist, if ever the need were to arise, as they did after 9/11? I don't remember a lot of countries coming to our aid after 9/11, but that's fine.
Morocco.
In homes across the nation, children are asking their parents what this means. Jews, blacks, Hispanics, Muslims are as part of America as whites and Protestants. But today they wonder, where might this lead? To bitterness and tears, or perhaps to anger and violence? The potential consequences are severe in the extreme. Accordingly, the president must take remedial action in the extreme. He should address the American people, acknowledge that he was wrong, apologize. State forcefully and unequivocally that racists are 100% to blame for the murder and violence in Charlottesville. This is where I disagree with him, but we'll get into it. Testify that there is no conceivable compassion or moral equivalency between the Nazis, who brutally murdered millions of Jews and who hundreds of thousands of Americans gave their lives to defeat, and the counter-protesters who were outraged to see these fools parading the Nazi flag, Nazi armband, and Nazi salute. And once and for all, he must definitively repudiate the support of David Duke and his ilk and call for every American to banish racists and haters from any and every association. This is a defining moment for President Trump. But much more than that, it is a moment that will define America and the hearts of our children. They are watching, our soldiers are watching, and the world is watching. Mr. President, act now for the good of our country.
So what you can tell us why you have an issue with that one part, but I actually get it. Like, after hearing him, because I've always kind of agreed, like, I've been on that line of, like, yeah, there is responsibility on both sides for violence, but I do think it is fair to say that it is the fault of that side. And the reason why is because Black Lives Matter and Antifa don't show up if the Klan doesn't show up.
I don't think that's true at all.
Why would they show up?
Because look at Milo Yiannopoulos. Look at just the president.
Milo Yiannopoulos is another guy who says fuck black people.
No, he doesn't. He says
and then he fucks black people.
He doesn't actually say that. So the fact that you're saying that they're not going to show up unless there's actual Nazis, that's not true. They've shown up for a multitude of reasons.
But here's what I'm saying: they would not have shown up in Charlottesville.
To that specific. Well, again.
So the violence is the
how
responsibility.
is it set up? And I don't think that neo-Nazis or white supremacists or KKK members set that up. Like I said, there was a guy who was doing the Unite the Right rally. It got taken over by these groups. They were going to show up regardless. It just escalated because it was poorly managed.
But I mean, I understand though what I think Brandon is saying is in the Romney comment about. Because the death was caused by
It was.
Yeah. So in that specific case, you can say, yes, it was to blame this group, or at least a person of this group was to blame.
Well, the problem is he doesn't stop with murder. He says the murder and violence.
Yeah, and that's where I can see. Like, if it was just murder, that's totally true. But the violence, I would say there's blame. Like, equal, maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe it tips off at some point, but they're definitely both sharing the blame.
And the sheriff of Charlottesville said that we saw both sides, because they asked him which side instigated the violence. He said both sides were equally instigated.
I mean, I've looked at the videos and everything, and I can't, most of the recordings start afterwards, so it's really hard to tell who, if anybody. There's tensions flaring, mob mentalities going wild.
But just my general thoughts, of how things happen in the world, I highly doubt it was all one side doing it.
Oh, no, not at all.
And I don't think it's important to figure out who threw the first punch.
It's not. It just depends on who's getting punched.
But I do think that as far as Charlottesville goes, if people with torches don't show up, then Antifa doesn't show up. At least not with weapons.
I disagree.
But again, like they
for...
both have the right to protest, so it ultimately comes down to the police and the state not taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Or even the federal. The federal government should probably get in on this if it's going to be something that could lead to race wars or racial tension,
And it looks like they just dropped the ball. It almost looks like they intentionally instigated it.
Yeah.
Like that they... And I don't know why you would do that. I don't understand.
Yeah, they literally had no barricades. They had no anything.
Well,
they said the police were leaving. Like the police were actually leaving as this stuff was going on.
I know the police said, along with the governor, that they had never told them to stand down or anything. I've seen things from the ACLU that said that they did tell them to stand down. It certainly looked like they were standing down. It didn't look like they were actually.
If you watch the
doing
video,
anything.
you saw 200 protesters on each side and not a cop to be seen.
No,
anywhere.
And the cops you did see, because you did see like 4 cops. I think I saw 4 cops in all the videos, but they're all standing way back, like.
Yeah. Well, I saw one with
how
the
funny is
shields
it that I think we talked last week about when Michael Brown died. Before the news had even gotten out, they had SWAT teams ready, prepared for this.
Right.
But they can't get them 2 months ahead of time. They can't get people there.
Now, I don't like that because there's like this conspirity theory going around that like this was set up and they wanted them to do it.
And Alex Jones thinks that it's the Jewish people pretending to be white supremacists.
They said that
lizard people,
like the helicopter guys knew too much, so they had to take them down. Like, come on, dude, are you fucking serious?
Right. I still don't fully understand the helicopter situation. I still don't understand how they
I haven't really read
down.
much more about that, which I think they're probably going to be a little slower to put out what happened there.
I know that the funeral is happening today for one of the officers in that helicopter.
To me, and again, I think that if the argument here is that there was only violence on one side and that this side's worse than the other, I don't agree with that argument. I think that we all agree that Nazis, as where they stand, are not good, but I don't think everyone there was a Nazi, and I don't think that everyone
there on Saturday was a Nazi, but everybody that marched with torches, if they weren't a Nazi before they marched with torches, they are now.
Well, anybody doing the Heil Hitler at that protest was a Nazi.
Well,
and now we get into freedom of speech.
Here's my thing, though, like just to touch on that. Well, it leads right into it, but my argument here is that, look, if I'm a guy who's like, man, I really don't want him to take that statue down. Like, that represents my heritage. Like, if I have good intentions for why I don't want that statue down, I'm like, oh, they're doing a march on the statue tonight. I'm gonna go. And then I show up, and everybody has torches and is screaming blood for soil, and Jews will not replace us. I'm gonna not stay around that crowd. I'm gonna be like, wow, I'm not a Nazi. I'm gonna leave. If I stayed, I no longer can say that I wasn't there for that.
Well, okay, so I'm going to give you that example because that makes sense for where you're coming from. But at the same time, we've seen Black Lives Matter walk down the streets screaming. The one that you always hear a lot is pigs in a blanket fry like bacon. Or there was another one where there was a large group walking down the street, and we'll put in the link. I'll give you guys the footage where they're screaming, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now?" I don't think that everyone that's involved with Black Lives Matter thinks that.
No,
and
I
the
don't
same
think
we saw
so
with
either.
Berkeley. There was people who showed up and they did the same thing. You said you show up with torches. They showed up with.
But I don't
baseball
think
bats.
you can put Black Lives Matter on the same level as you put the Klan.
I don't see why not. They're
The
both
Klan's on a
using violence.
terrorist list. That's why.
One's just been around longer. I think that as soon as
Well,
you
no,
use violence and justify it.
One has lynched thousands and thousands of people starting in 1985, and this is the greatest time for somebody to start watching, right? Oh, amazing.
Right.
But
To me, I don't understand the moral equivalency argument because to me they're both doing violence. So just because one side's been around
they're
longer,
both doing violence, but dude, like
I mean, one group sprang up almost because of the existence of the other. Like the Black Panthers are not as bad as the KKK because the KKK had no reason to start out being violent. They just hated black people. The Black Panthers was in response to that violence. They fought back.
The KKK started in 1865 as a result of losing the Civil War.
Right.
We are going to teach those black people a lesson for being free now. So I don't think that you can. I understand that like violence should be condemned equally on both sides, but what I don't understand is how a group that started with the opinion that we're going to kill these people and because they are free now can be put on the same level as a group that started because a kid got shot in St. Louis and black people were statistically getting shot more than white people.
Exactly, but what has it turned into now? And the fact of the matter is that
I get that. So what I'm saying it's an easy, like if you just simplify it, which you can't, I understand.
Exactly, and that's where
but
I'm
if
having
you
the problem.
if you simplify it to we draw the line at terrorist organizations.
Right.
It's an easy call.
I don't understand, but to me, you say that KKK is a terrorist organization, and Black Lives Matter and Antifa especially are not. But why not?
I would not necessarily in my personal opinion, and I'm pissing off both sides here, but actually I'm only really pissing off one side because I guarantee that I have like 90 Nazi comments at the end of this.
Just look at NPR.
But but to me it's not so far-fetched that Antifa, because of their tactics, could fall on that list. So Black Lives Matter I think is a little bit of a grayer area because it's easier to see what Antifa is, right? Like it's easy to see, who the Klan is when they show up with torches.
Right.
You know who Antifa is when they show up with riot gear. Like,
and I think what Antifa and Black Lives Matter are going to be a lot like the Black Panthers in that they start off as something to counter violence they see against themselves.
Right.
And that bitterness of living a life where you're constantly put down by society. It's going to turn some people just like, well, screw all white people. And I can totally understand that mentality if your entire life has been...
And I think this rises because of it too, because so many people are saying screw all white people now, and you've got groups that are saying that. Now you're going to see white people go against it. And it's easy to sit there and go, oh well, white people, no big deal. But if you are lumping everyone in and saying, well, even if you're not violent, even if you don't have these views, it doesn't matter because I think you're a Nazi.
Right.
You are going to repress thought.
So
free
is the
speech.
term Nazi right? Shouldn't it be white supremacist? Because isn't Nazi tied to the political?
Yeah, but here's
the mentality of Germany,
the social workers,
and I'm sure some of these
but
neo Nazis are in support of Hitler.
That's a good point, though. So we talk about let's just pose the question now: should hate speech be protected? The Supreme Court would say yes, and I absolutely understand their reasoning for saying yes, because if you suppress thought, you are no better than any other fascist regime that is not allowing somebody to think. The reason that what the Supreme Court would argue is these awful thoughts, these awful thoughts, racist, bigotries thoughts are the ultimate show of freedom of speech, because even though they're disgusting and we hate them and they're
Right.
repulsive to us, we have to protect them.
That used to be the Democratic argument: is I
So-
can't stand what you're saying, but I will
So-
defend it.
but
You're
the-
right to say
But
it.
there is another argument to be made that I've seen online, and I'm not saying like this is not. I'll have to drop this 30 times in the next 15 minutes. That like this is not how I think, because I completely understand.
I know
the
how sound
logic.
bites work. I think that is how you think. No, I'm
Yeah,
joking.
right, sound bites. Yeah. But what I will say is, I think that. But I want to make the argument for the people that I see making the argument, and the argument is that hate speech shouldn't be protected, and here's where so I personally would say that just if you termed it that simply, hate speech shouldn't be protected, I would disagree. When you say that hate speech shouldn't be allowed to assemble, I see more of an argument for that. Now, I don't say that, like, I don't take that position, but what I do is I understand why somebody would be like, look, this group is on a terrorist list
Right.
in the United States. So there's that point. They're a horrible, heinous group. So do they have the right to say what they think? Yes. Do they have the right to show up with nooses and torches and pitchforks? No. And I think the only real argument to be made there is like they are on a terrorist list, and will we let ISIS do that?
Well, I think we should probably not call it hate, because the First
Depends on what
Amendment
they're
protect.
saying.
You can hate any. I hate the
Yeah,
KKK.
right.
My speech is protected.
I
To say
think-
that
Exactly.
I think it's violent
Absolutely.
speech. Is
I think-
what?
yes.
Yeah.
And that's where we have a problem with it. And to me, this is why it's a slippery slope.
I think hate speech is too vague.
Exactly. And the problem is that they want to just say, well, we're going to say that you're part of this group. I think there's a lot of misdiagnosis in groups all the way around. They sit there and go, oh, you're black, you're a thug. What? Oh, you showed up and you want to keep this statue, so you're a Nazi. What?
Right.
So we're already living in a time where there's so much misdiagnosis
And generalization.
and generalization. So to sit there and say, well, this group can't assemble is so easy to look at Black Lives Matter and Antifa and go, now you can't assemble. And I guarantee you they wouldn't stand for that. They would be up
I
in
think
in
though,
rise.
I think that here's where I feel like if I took that opinion that these guys shouldn't be allowed to, my argument for that, and the most sound one that I've seen online, is that I don't think many Americans would be okay with ISIS showing up at the door of their state house or whatever and saying, look, we want to march this Friday. We're not going to behead anybody this time, but we have a message we got to get out. I don't think that people would be okay with that, whether those people were foreigners or whether they were Americans.
What about,
I think that because they're on a terrorist list, you don't let the Al Qaeda march. You don't
I'm
let
going
ISIS
to
march.
Immediately counter this with Linda Saussure. She is known for supporting terrorist groups, and the left is putting her at the head of all of these marches.
I have
So-
no idea who that is.
You don't?
No.
You're gonna have to look it up, man.
All
'cause
right.
Linda Saussure is and again, like they had that whole women's
Sucks
march.
that your solid argument was a reference that I didn't understand.
Yeah, that sucks.
We'll have to get into it next week.
Yeah, well, she basically was behind like the women's march and things like that. And there's a woman who is a known terrorist that was a known terrorist.
Oh, is
she
this the
helped
lady that was
support-
like calling for jihad or something?
yeah, and all of that, and it's totally fine.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Well,
no,
to
it's
them
not.
it is.
It-
And again, that's where the slippery slope comes in, where it's okay if you say this is our standard and we're going to apply it equally. But that's not what we're seeing.
But
in
that's
this
what
day.
I'm trying to do here. In my argument, that's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to do here.
And
because
my problem is I don't want to apply it. I think that we already have a system that says you can't incite violence. Stick with that. Don't try to censor people's speech that's not violent, because
So
then
then
you're going to
you
start
think-
applying it to everybody.
So then, is it easy for us to then agree, at least in theory, that everybody that showed up last Saturday at Charlottesville for the monument thing wasn't necessarily part of any white nationalist group or anything like that.
Right.
But I would argue
or
that,
Antifa and all that.
Right. But I would argue that the people that showed up at the Tiki Torch March,
Yeah.
I would argue that those people were.
But
at
what
the-
are they saying and what are they doing?
Well, we heard what they were saying and what they were doing. And
Right.
it was very violent. So I think
what was the exact
It
thing that
was
they said?
blood for soil.
Blood for
and
soil.
Jews will not replace us. And they were talking about lynching people, shouting at people that
Yeah.
they were going to lynch
So
people.
take that out.
So at that point, they should have not been allowed to show up the next day.
No, they shouldn't have.
They should have been. The police should
By
have
the rules
moved
that-
in and said, "You guys need to leave town, or we're
Right.
arresting people."
By the rules of everything that we've agreed on, you can't incite violence.
Right. In the same way that if Antifa started marching the night
What do
before,
we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now?
then we show up and we say, "You
No
can't be
more.
here." Like, you can protest,
Yeah.
but you can't
And-
incite violence, and that's
Right.
what
I
you're
guess it
doing.
comes down to what is inciting violence. If you get up there and say, "I wish all whatever people would die," it's not
Yeah.
really inciting violence. That's just your
Exactly.
personal hope. But if you get up there and say it with a little more like,
Let's
"Oh, I wish
organize."
someone would kill them," that
Yeah.
might be taken as more of your taunting someone to do it.
Right.
And
Well,
encouraging
and I
it.
think that simple rules of terrorism come into play, right? Like, if you're walking through a town and people are scared to come outside because of what you're shouting,
Well, then you'd
terrorism
have to say that,
rules apply.
Yeah, you have to say Antifa's a terrorist organization because they were going around right after the election and beating
Then
up conservatives for wearing Trump
if
gear.
that is where the government draws the line, then I was
Then
thinking,
they
yeah,
should put them on.
they both fit the criteria.
That's where that's where the
I
frustration
also think
comes
we've
from.
made it very known, and this is the worst episode to say it in, but nobody here, I don't think, is a huge fan of Antifa. Like, I get
No.
I think that the
I get the
idea,
spirit behind
I
it.
get the spirit behind it,
Yeah.
like, but I think
I
it's
don't.
In the
it's
same way with the-
overreaching, and I
Yeah.
think that violence is bad on all sides.
Yeah.
You gotta call it what it is.
Again, I'll go back to the Black Panthers. I agree with their ethics. I don't agree with the way they go about trying to combat
Yeah.
racism.
Right.
I don't
with
agree with
violence.
their I don't agree with their speech either, though.
Yeah,
And-
I
No.
mean, I agree with the idea behind founding it, which is to
Right.
combat what they're being pushed.
just
upon
like
them.
Black Lives Matter, I think they have some valid
Oh yeah,
points.
you know, and then
I don't think blocking roads and beating people up is the way to do
No,
that.
not at all.
Right.
Like, you know,
So
so I'm okay. And the same thing with like the Colin Kaepernick thing, and that, you saw that getting called out with conservatives, where it's like Colin Kaepernick sticks down. How dare he? Tiki torches marching through the street. Well, that's fine. It's like, no, dude. We all have to have standards, and we have to apply them equally.
Yeah.
So to me, it's very frustrating because that's apparently not the narrative that we're seeing now, and conservatives are jumping on board with the
Well, and
with
what
liberals
sucks, too-
of saying there is no other debate. There is no debate here. Everyone that was there was a Nazi, and we should not let them
And
speak.
I hate that sentence. There is no debate. There's a debate about everything.
Oh, yeah.
there's always
absolutely.
There's always a debate.
that's why we got the balls to do this episode today, because there is a debate to be had
Yeah.
about everything.
Right.
I think the worst thing we can all agree on is this, like, I don't know, the suppression of information. Or
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Now let
of
us
ideas.
reiterate, because it's been like 8 minutes, that we're not Nazis and we do not like Nazis.
Yeah, all of us don't like Nazis.
So, you know,
All
but
of us don't like the KKK. I don't think any of us like Antifa.
no. But
like-
here's the other
No,
thing that I would say.
new to for me to be on one side or the other.
I wanted to make the argument, and it probably would have been better 5 minutes ago, but I wanted to make the argument just because I've seen it that can you draw the line at Nazi flag? Like, Nazi flag represents the slaughter of millions of people. Anybody in 2017 who's picking up a Nazi flag knows what they're getting into. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh well,
Yeah.
you know, it represents nothing but the Nazi party.
I mean, you could argue
So,
that for the Southern,
have-
the Confederate flag, is that
Yeah.
anybody who chooses it, I mean, they
Yeah.
might not think it's racist, but that's how they're coming off to most people.
But the
But
Confederate
it
flag,
really comes down to
I put the Confederate flag a little bit different because the Confederate flag was over, like, in as far as our Civil War and what that represented. That was just the Confederate States, which won in slavery, but that's not what everybody was about.
Right.
I mean,
But again, that's not the.
but the Nazi flag is the Nazi flag. Like, you can tell me whatever the
Yeah.
swastika used to mean,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you that you're full of shit because nobody buys that. It's not what it means
Yeah.
now.
Again, it's freedom of speech, in my opinion. I think that anyone can fly any flag that they want as long as they're not being violent.
I
Again, you
don't
can
think
burn the
we
American
would,
flag.
I don't think that
I don't
we
think that
would
it's-
allow
that's-
people to walk through the streets with ISIS flags.
Right.
And I think for the same reason, we don't let them walk through the streets burning crosses or waving
I
swastikas.
think we do, don't we? They can burn crosses. They can burn the American flag. They can burn whatever they want as long as it's not violent.
Right,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they can walk through the streets doing it.
I don't know.
Like, I don't think you can walk
I mean, I
through-
don't know. If you have a big fire in the middle of the street, it's probably more of a safety hazard. But
Yeah. So, but I would
Again,
say,
just
like,
let everyone talk because if they don't have a good argument, they don't have a good argument.
Right.
People are going to be able to go, no, I disagree with
that's
that.
why, I mean, when you get to violence, it's pretty much because one side realized, I can't defend my argument, I'm going to punch you.
Right. And again, I understand where Antifa and Black Lives Matter are coming from. There's legitimate grievances on these sides. But same time, you decide to, instead of talking, you've decided to start.
You almost
punching
want to take
people.
him to a Gandhi chorus to be like, this is how you non-violently protest something you hate and make actual change.
Now, a lot of
Sit
people who
inside a
followed him
restaurant,
died, so that
douchebag.
sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe
probably
not
don't
the
want
best
to do that.
example.
Yeah, same with Martin Luther King, you know.
But I think where this really paints a problem, because what you said a second ago was the idea that, like, you know, we're saying this is how it is. Like, there's no other debate. There's no other side. It's just this side or this side, and it's black and white, and there's no gray areas. And I get that.
Which is
That's a
never
problem.
true.
Here's where I think it creates a problem or here's where I think that problem applies. I think the Republican Party they worked so hard for the last 5 years of Obama's presidency to not be the old, crusty, white, racist party.
Right.
And in one weekend, they are now the old, white, crusty, racist party. And I don't think that's right.
No.
But I also don't think that's going away until
Yeah.
Donald Trump goes away.
Well, here's
like,
my-
I think he is now, and I think if somehow he makes it to another election, which I find very hard to believe at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I think now you can align him with the Klan.
It's easier to see a path to impeachment now than it ever has
Yeah.
I mean, we say that every month, though.
been. Yeah. I usually disagree, though, because normally I just feel like it's Democrats spamming the impeach
I
button.
know, but I
Yeah.
think
But-
here, when you see Republican senators coming out going, we need radical changes
Yeah.
from the White House, that to me is a setup for,
And-
we're going to impeach you because you made tensions worse.
And, well, I thought this is it. I pulled an article from the Washington Post, but they talk about a survey by the Economist and YouGov that found that 2-1 Americans actually believe that these statues are more about our history than about
Really?
racism. But the debate has become racism. So the
Right.
original debate about statues and whether we should take them down is kind of a moot point now.
Right.
Well,
and
what's-
that's where it's going. Like, you see now where they're trying to take all the statues down. Like, that's going to
They're
happen.
taking them down. Did you
Yeah.
see this? How many came down this
Baltimore
week?
took down 4 overnight.
Well, we saw protesters come in and just do it themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Philadelphia took, and those people got charged. And I don't know why the left. I keep hearing voices on the left say that they shouldn't have got charged. Yes, they should have.
Yeah,
It was
you
destruction
can't-
of
And this
property.
is the same way that someone graffitied the Lincoln Memorial. If they
Yeah.
caught them, they should have gotten charged. I don't think.
It's like, oh,
How
I,
do you
I disagree with this, so I'm just going to tear it down.
How
Well,
do
it's
you-
fine.
How
side tangent, but
do you graffiti the Lincoln Memorial? Like, it's DC.
I've been
right?
there,
It's,
and I know there are guards.
Right.
it's on camera. The
Maybe it
whole
was
city
the
is on
guards.
camera.
They're the leakers. But
They're not leaking anything vital.
things
though.
are so crazy, I wouldn't doubt it at this point that it was the guards doing it. But again, when it comes to, like, let's all just not be crazy. So my diagnosis for the whole thing is that there is so much blame on all sides. I know that that's controversial to say and everything, but first and foremost, it
One
comes,
side, not many sides. That's what that guy
It's just one
said.
side. First and foremost, I think that it comes down to two main things. I think that it was mismanagement. This whole situation was mismanaged and really almost set the whole thing up for violence.
Yeah.
And
I think it did.
two was Donald Trump and the way that he handled it. Because the timeline was he came out, he said his thing with many sides. Then he came out and he said, I disavow white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And then he came out and went hard against Antifa. And I think that he got the order wrong. Now, I don't disagree with anything that he said. I think that he did it wrong. First off, the first thing you do is you come out against neo-Nazis and white supremacists. That
Absolutely.
should have been step one. Then step two should have been on many sides. And then step three should have been, we've denounced this side. Now let's take a look at this
I
side
think
and
this-
start the debate.
I think
The
that would have
smartest-
played better.
Yeah, the smartest move would have been to tell the left to take the moral high ground. Like, don't
Right.
let them bait
These
you
are
into
your
violence.
principles.
You know,
Right.
yeah, exactly. You're the ones who are talking about peace. You have to live by it too.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we hear a lot from the leftists. We're not talking about that.
I think this is where Trump could use a really good speechwriter and not wing it, because he's
Yeah.
obviously not good at winging
Yeah,
it.
but how long would that speech writer be employed? Like, there is literally, like, I'm actually afraid of resignations at this point, because there's going to be a point where there's only Donald Trump left.
Right.
And now,
I'll go it alone.
is this a dictatorship?
No big deal.
All of a sudden? Like, what just happened? Will you just let them resign their way into fascism?
Right.
What do we have left? Sessions and family members about?
Sessions, family members, and then the two that nobody ever hears about, Rick Perry and Ben Carson.
Right.
I
So
still think
that
Ben
there is-
Carson's like in the background doing brain surgeries and shit. Like, I don't think he's actually doing anything.
He's just got a team set up. Like, just do my work
like
for me.
somebody's trying to teach him how to speak fast.
And his house has been vandalized and things like that. And again, you don't see the left speaking out against it. So I think that there is apparent hypocrisy from the left that I think needs to go away. I think that Donald Trump needs to be stronger against the white supremacists. And I think
needs
that
to
everyone
come
just
out
needs
and-
to realize that
he needs to say, "I don't want your votes."
He does need
He
to say
needs
it.
to piss them off.
Yeah, he needs to say that.
And I think until he pisses them off, like until they know he's actually not behind them, then like I just think it's too easy to align him with them, and I think it's his own fault. He did this.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
know, you
and again,
can,
there's
fire
many facets to it. I don't
you
think
can
that he
fire
did
as
all
many
of it.
people as you want from the White House, but there's one constant in the White House.
Yep.
It's Donald Trump.
And
Just
again-
Donald Trump makes his own shitty beds, and then he sleeps in
Yeah.
them.
And again, I don't think it's all his fault. I think that again, people wanting to tear down monuments creates this whole tension. Then it being mismanaged escalates it, and then him not saying what he needed to say was the last straw for a lot of people.
Yeah, it turned that argument into an argument over race when it should have been an
Right.
argument over history versus
And freedom of speech.
racism. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's
like
what-
I said,
Which is
last-
really the crux of the debate.
good news,
and there
though.
shouldn't be there really shouldn't be much of a debate there. I think we've all agreed.
Fuck Nazis. Swing it in.
I mean, you can get
That's
into
right.
like
Fuck
the history
Nazis.
though. A lot of these statues, Southern statues, went up in the 50s around the Jim Crow laws.
Right.
They weren't put up right after the Civil War. So you can get into like, well, they were done for racist reasons, and I would
Yeah.
agree with that. But that's almost the case by case basis per
wouldn't.
statue.
Yeah, I think yeah, exactly. It goes to per statue. If the statue is just like a guy hugging some kids.
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
if you put in,
he
you know,
was there.
the Forrester, the guy who created the KKK, if you put up a statue of him in 1950
Yeah.
to just, to scare black people, that's obviously a
maybe
racist statue.
get him away.
Yeah.
I love how Brandon was talking about the monument, what do you call it, Mount Rushmore, and then they were like, take it down, take it all down.
I told you guys I'm a prophet. Like that's
You
like
have been
two-
proven right a lot on
Yeah.
the show.
2 or 3 weeks
again,
in a
that's
row
why
where
we
something
need to-
happened.
yeah,
Oh
that's-
yeah, North Korea, we're still here. We'll get into that later.
Right. But again, I think that it's really dangerous whenever they say there's only one side, because it's not true. And I think that when they say that,
There's
like, well,
always
now
more
you're
than one
defending
side.
Nazis. And no, people are defending Americans. You have the right to be wrong. You have the right to be disgusting. You don't have the right to cause violence. So if you're causing violence, you got to shut it down. But if you just have disgusting views, if you're American, you have the right to say it. And and I think that that's where we're at right now, is where they're saying, no, you don't have the right to say it. And I don't agree with it. But I have to defend American values and the American rights.
I think we can. I think we can all agree on that. I do think I wanted.
It's hard because they're Nazis.
I wanted right. I wanted to be that voice though for those people, because those you people out there in the world that are thinking this is why they shouldn't have this right. I get it. I understand.
I get it.
But it sets a dangerous precedent.
But it
to be
does.
like, we can pick on one group and their rights.
Right.
If they turn that against liberals, are they going to be as happy?
Especially
Right,
when we
yeah.
see so
Or-
much
or
misdiagnosis.
or even go further than that and be like, well, the Quran says this, so now that's the platform, and
Right.
now Muslims can't do this.
Exactly, yeah.
It's too much of a slippery slope. But
Right. It's like we said with the Quran. I can point to where it says kill all infidels. I can open the Bible and show where it says stone all the gays.
Right.
We can look at that, but so that argument is like, oh, well, that's their platform. But it's not really. We all know that. We know
Right.
that there's good Muslims. We know that there's good Christians.
Yeah.
And it's just not that simple.
I
No,
know that
it's
there are
not.
good Republicans.
Yeah, and right now I feel
I
like the
haven't met
narrative
many,
is being pushed that no, there isn't. If this is what they stand for, and all of them stand for this, and there is no debate, and that's really dangerous, because all I have to do is just look over to the next person and go, well, there's no debate. As soon as someone else gets in power,
Right.
You know,
yeah, no, I agree with you. I do. But so if this segment hasn't ended our careers as TDAP, we'll see.
Try harder next week.
Yeah, right. So we'll be right back.
President Donald Trump says he's shutting down 2 of his business advisory councils. Trump said in a tweet Wednesday, rather than putting pressure on the business people of the Manufacturing Council and Strategy and Policy Forum, I am ending both. Thank you all. The announcement came after a slew of CEOs announced their resignations from some of Trump's councils. Many of them cited his controversial comments about the violence in Charlottesville as the reason. After the first few CEOs backed out, Trump called them grandstanders and claimed he had many others ready to take their place.
All right, now let's get into the rest of the week. Obviously, stemming off of the Charlottesville comments that President Trump made, we saw a lot of people start resigning from advisory councils this
Right.
week. We had it was the economic.
well, it was the business.
liaison. Almost.
Yeah,
Right.
basically a bunch of businessmen that were advising the president. We saw a lot of them stand down.
And then Trump, in classic Trump fashion, was like, "I gotta get out in front of this." So like, I'm dissolving these.
Right.
Yeah. Did you dissolve
There
them,
was
or did they all quit?
Yeah,
And
there
you're
was
like,
a infrastructure.
Restructuring.
Yeah, something like that. That committee, I guess, or advisory committee that was going to be formed that he said will not be formed now,
Right.
presumably because the members they were courting backed away.
Right. The Economic Council, Advisory Council, which, let's be completely frank about the whole situation. Yeah. You're like name
Like
drop.
what?
But these guys only met 3 times in the
Yeah.
last 6 months. So, like, are they important? Yes. Do we need people looking at how to make the economy more prosperous? Yes.
Well, we saw Tesla back away whenever he got away from the Paris Accords.
Right.
Which, in my opinion, like, you don't get your way, so you back away. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, I can see him taking the moral high ground of like this is an imperative to our future and our children.
He does also
he
own a
is
lot
on
of
that
solar
side
companies.
of the scientific.
I do also think, though, this is a little bit different. Like, these
It
are
is.
companies that are like, well, is my stock going to go down if I stand with
Yeah.
somebody who
And a lot
hasn't
of the-
clearly stood against the white supremacists?
I mean, like more than half the members of the 15-person digital economy economy board of advisors have like quit, and it's a wave. Like it started out like a couple trickling, and then just all of a
the
sudden,
arts and humanities, the entire
The entire
committee.
thing, yeah, it was a mass
Which
resignation.
probably not going to miss you guys. Sorry, but you know,
half the ones I was reading, I was like, "What do they do? I've never heard of these
Right.
before."
we tell them which art to like.
So, but that's
Like-
but you have to look at that in terms of like how
It's not
harmful
good,
how
yeah.
harmful is this to the country? Because at some point, even Republicans who feel like Donald Trump is getting shafted here have to go, okay, yes, he's getting shafted, but is it best for our country to have nobody looking at the economy, nobody looking at
Right.
infrastructure, a Congress that can't work with the president because the president keeps putting him on Twitter blast?
I mean, a bunch of cabinets not appointed yet.
At some
still.
point, you have to look at it as Republicans who support this guy and be like, is it time to cut our losses?
Right.
It's not going to be the popular thing to do, especially amongst his base. And I don't know if now's the time to do it. All I'm saying is at some point, if you keep losing people, if people keep getting fired, there's an argument that Republicans make a lot that, well, you know, every administration goes through restructuring. Yes, but not
to this degree.
Not to this degree, and not in 7 months at all.
Again, I think that looking at it from the outside, I think a lot of this just has to be with fuck Trump, and they're just saying fuck Trump.
And that
so
might
we're gonna
be
just
the
say
case, but if it's causing people
Yeah, at some
if it's
point-
causing the job market to hurt, or if
Yeah.
it's causing
No,
whatever.
that's really interesting. Also, because the markets haven't seen anything because of this. Like because of the whole thing, they were expecting the whole Charlottesville thing and everything. We were expecting to see the markets plummet, and they didn't.
Yeah.
They're staying steady. So until that really happens, I don't think anyone's going to really do anything.
We've also seen though that Republicans be asked for comment on Trump's comments, and none
Won't
of
do
them.
it.
That nobody's
Yeah.
touching it.
Well,
and then, like we mentioned in the last segment, when you have that, and you have all these resignations, and you have guys, Republican senators that are calling for radical changes, it doesn't look good.
It doesn't leave
No.
many people left to be on Team Trump.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. And you have to ask yourself as a supporter, has it gone too far? Can the country still prosper under this guy, even if he is getting screwed?
I would say yes, absolutely, because that's what we're seeing. That's my
Well, I
response.
mean, but the economy's been on under Obama, we've had a great economy. So this is
I
I
think
wouldn't
that's
give Trump too much credit for
yeah,
this.
that was
He's riding a
slippery
wave.
slope. When it comes to
Where I would give-
Obama's numbers, a lot of those, like I said, a lot of those jobs that he created were shit jobs that they claim you can't have a livable wage on. So is he creating jobs, but they're only the bad jobs. It's like the sign waiver. We don't need that job. Like it's good. It's a tally on the mark. You know, you mark the tally. Good job. But do we really need it? No.
Yeah, we're not opening up jobs in the
Yeah,
sciences
and the jobs that we're seeing
I get
coming
that.
back.
But I would
and-
say, though, that when you inherit what Barack Obama did versus what
Yeah.
Donald Trump did, you are starting off on a better foot, obviously. That you can't hold
There's
that
not a
against
recession.
anybody, But I would say that Trump that Trump has done benefit, like the stock market has been very high since the election. So like I think
unemployment rate has gone down even with more participation, which is
Right.
a big deal. He has created over 1 million jobs.
Unemployment number is still skewed and still uses.
I don't like
false-
the way that they do
Right.
the unemployment number, but the whole point that I don't like about the unemployment numbers is if you're not actively searching for a job for 4 months, they don't count you. So even though unemployment may be very high, it still looks like it's low because they've just stopped looking. And that's what
Right.
we saw during the and Mitt Romney, that was his big argument against Barack Obama, is like, you say that the unemployment rate's is lower, not because of you.
Right.
It's because, and the same thing with government spending or government jobs going up. Again, it's in spite of you that the markets are doing as well as they are. And now that we see with Trump, we do see a lot of these companies coming back. A lot of companies are coming back to
But
the U.S.
I think there's something to be said here about the fact that he needs Congress to be on his side, and right now
Yes.
he's not doing a very good job of doing that. He needs business leaders to be on his side. He needs these economic councils and these infrastructure councils to remain whole,
Right.
so that they can get some big pieces of his agenda passed into legislation. Because at the end of the year, if he hasn't gotten anything passed, the argument to be made, the only argument to be made, is Republicans
go with that.
cannot govern. They can't.
No, I think here's the thing when it comes to the next things that are coming up are going to be infrastructure and the big one, tax reform. So if he can't pass tax reform, if enough and I think that would be on both the fault of Donald Trump and the fault of the Republicans, they have been consolidated on tax reform for the past 10 years. If they can't pass it easily now, whenever they have everyone on board, then we have to take a step back and go, well, what is it about this guy that's making it not
That is
happen?
what I want to wait and see what the stock market will do and what the economy will do, because I think if like
They're
if he
expecting
doesn't-
this.
yeah, and that's why we have this bomb, because they expected when Trump got in there he would be very friendly to businesses and
Right.
business owners.
And I still think
If
he will
doesn't
be.
Get this legislation passed, they might just bolt back to wherever they were.
Then and that's the thing with the markets, they don't like uncertainty. Right now it seems certain that we're going to pass these things. If we don't, we've got a problem.
And that's what I'm saying. If we don't do it by the end of 2017, Congress is worried about re-election. They're not worried about Donald Trump's
Once we get
agenda
into
next
18,
year.
yeah.
And so if he doesn't get anything done in 2017, people are already making an argument that he is a lame duck president. I wouldn't go that far.
No, because he has gotten a lot of bills signed, and he has done a lot of executive orders. There are a lot of things that we've like. Just look at the what do you call it? The VA bills
Right.
and things
There
that we should have been doing this whole
Yeah,
time. And
I
just
think I
didn't
did
do.
see statistics comparatively that Obama and Bush, and I believe even Clinton, had done more by this point, had gotten more bills passed than Trump. But
Yeah, and again,
and I think that a big part of that is, dude, don't attack every single person that's on your side.
he needs to stop, because especially now, it's becoming a detriment.
And again, like, it kind of goes back to like, say the right thing when it comes to white supremacists, because
Right.
because it should be hard
And
for
it has
Republicans to
consequence.
stand next to him on that, because
Yeah.
you know,
well, there's nothing
he's
more
wrong.
anti-American than Nazis.
Right. So I just think that as far as like those councils leaving, whether those councils serve a hugely important part in the way that the government works and the country runs, or not, and that's debatable from an opinion level.
Right.
I think that it's not good when you have large groups of people that are supposed to be there to help America,
Right.
to make America great again.
Now, obviously, my counter argument is we're not seeing any poor repercussions. It looks like right now, because the argument would be, well, this makes us look weak on the national stage. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing them renegotiate NAFTA. We're seeing Mexico on board. We're seeing Canada on board. We're seeing them make good deals with our allies and things. So we haven't seen that yet. Again, it's will that create uncertainty in the markets? And we haven't seen that yet.
Right.
So we haven't seen anything negative come from it. It looks bad. It looks like the government's falling apart and everything, but we don't see the repercussions that we would think. we
Not
would
yet,
see.
but we wouldn't see them. We remember we're a fast food nation, right?
Yeah.
So if something happens today, then that means tomorrow something's going to be different. But
well,
it
yeah,
doesn't.
the business falls today. 3 months from now, people lose their jobs, and then
Right.
that comes on the next 6 month,
Right.
review they do.
So we can say that we haven't seen any negative repercussions, but I think it might still be too early to make that determination. Right now we haven't, I agree,
Right.
but we'll see.
The markets react immediately. So
The markets
we would
do
expect
react
to see it, and we
right.
haven't. So that's one we can definitively say. It doesn't look like it's having
Right.
an issue right now.
But we'll see,
everything else.
But in what we'll get into in just a second is there are repercussions elsewhere when we're talking about administration fallout, and I think that's a good place to go into Steve Bannon.
It has long been thought that Steve Bannon could be on the chopping block. Remember, he has been a lightning rod since the first day that President Trump announced he was going to serve as his chief strategist. He's a former top executive at Breitbart News, linked to the alt-right, the far-right conservative branch of the Republican Party. A lot of establishment Republicans told President Trump at the time that he shouldn't appoint Bannon to such a high-profile role. But he's really someone who was a touchstone to President Trump's base, all of those people who got President Trump elected. However, the calls for him to go have grown a lot louder in the wake of Charlottesville. There was a sense that the mixed messaging that we heard from President Trump, the fact that he compared white supremacists to some of those counter protesters, may have had echoes of Steve Bannon's very philosophy.
All right, Steve Bannon.
President Bannon.
Hashtag
Bannon
President
the Barbarian.
Right. Steve Bannon obviously made a phone call. What is with people in the Trump administration who have worked for media outlets,
Right.
not knowing that when they call reporters on the phone, that shit's gonna probably
By
get out.
definition,
Right.
isn't Bannon a reporter himself?
Right.
Owns Breitbart. Like, shouldn't he know how
Apparently he-
off the record works?
Yeah,
Right.
you need to say it.
Yeah.
Or-
Right. Yeah, you have to come in.
Now, so
and-
let's say what basically was going on. So Steve Bannon has been in the news because he did an interview with.
well,
Very left-leaning.
two-part
Yeah.
Steve Bannon reason.
yeah,
I don't remember
this
the
is
name
where
of what website he did it either.
yeah, but there was a very left wing, and he basically gave
Called
it.
the lady because of her. She had written her,
Yeah.
an article about,
I thought it was a guy.
or maybe a guy, feminism.
Have they decided?
Yeah,
But I believe they had written an article about China, and it was kind of somewhat like critical of Trump. And then Bannon called him up, him or her, and kind of like seemed to support the article, which was critical of his boss.
yeah. And then from that point, then about a week later, they got word that he has resigned or was fired.
And it seemed like there was some outrage among people he knew. Why did you give an interview to this,
Right.
so progressive website?
So here's what I heard about that. So I heard that whenever, apparently that he had been in contact with this guy before, that he doesn't agree with a lot of the things, but basically he read an article, that this guy had put out an article that was war between North Korea and the USA. Who wins? China. And this was something that Steve Bannon very much agreed with. And so he had called him up, and this, as the story goes, that he called the guy up and was really wanted to do a sit-down interview in the White House. And then they ended up having a phone call. They gave a brief thing. He said, this is what I agree with, all of that. And then afterwards was like, let's set up the actual interview. So apparently he never said this is off the record. That became the interview.
Which is so silly. Matt says ginger lives matter.
Ginger lives do matter.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Matt. Solidarity.
Solidarity.
We're the minority of the minority.
Yeah, but I just don't understand how a guy who works for a media mogul is like. Which let's not. I think I might have just given them a little bit too much credit.
Yeah,
We're
they're
not
not
talking about
too
Fox or
big.
CNN or,
Yeah, but how is he so like poorly versed in the intricacies of his job?
Because it's 4D chess. They made
just,
you do it.
it's just probably whiskey, like bourbon.
It probably
is. The
is.
reason.
That dude looks bad. Like he looks like he's like
Milo
right about to have liver failure.
Yiannopoulos posted "Winter is coming." What did that mean?
Oh my God.
Because
Milo's
to
a
me,
dingus.
I just thought like Klan. Really? Is it?
Well, you
Okay.
would liberal, you'd think clean. but no, Milo obviously was fired from Breitbart. He went on a tirade about how, oh my God, Steve Bannon will be the second coming, and now it's gonna go down. We've yet to see
Steve
any of
Bannon's
that.
comments though didn't seem too praiseworthy of the Trump administration.
I
mean,
haven't
he
seen
basically
those.
said this is where our movement came to die.
Yeah, well, that's not what I read.
He did seem to have a somewhat defeatist attitude, but I
Yeah.
think it's also like that's kind of been his attitude the last 2 months. I think he's kind of seen the writing on the wall when people started leaving.
Yeah.
sinking
Once he
ship.
lost Rance Priebus, because there was a whole controversy which we covered before that Reince Priebus really isn't in charge. It's really Steve Bannon. He's undermining him. He's pushing him aside. So they had this at the CPAC. They had this whole thing where they were going to come out and show the unity between Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus. And the whole time, Steve Bannon was just steamrolling Reince Priebus and was like, nope, that's what you think. This is what I think. There was no unity there. And then we see Reince Priebus out the door from the mooch. And at that point, they brought in, what was his name that they brought in for the new guy?
Something very bland.
Yeah, it's some general, and I cannot remember.
Oh,
what
General
it is.
Kelly?
Is that it? Yeah.
We're talking about who's there
The
now.
new,
Yes.
the new
General
head of
Kelly,
staff.
who
Chief
fired
of staff.
Caused all
Scaramucci,
the shakeups.
Right.
Yeah.
Apparently, he did not like Steve Bannon, and at that point, it was obvious that Steve Bannon was not going to be getting his words in.
This is where I'm kind of actually glad that grown-ups entered the room in the Trump administration and started
Yes.
throwing people out.
We knew Bannon was going to be gone for. I mean, me and you have talked about it and said he's not lasting this whole administration.
Now,
he's going
if
to leave.
grown-ups really wanted to enter the room, Donald Trump would start acting like a president. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should hold our breath for that because I don't think that's coming.
He does manage to always surprise us.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean,
have no
there are
problem with
good
the
things that
rallies.
there are good things that he's done, but like when it comes to watching this guy talk to the nation, like he is not the guy to be that guy. He's not the guy to talk to the world.
I disagree. I really do. Because, again, I've seen a lot of things happen. I saw him call out NATO, and then they started paying. Right. I saw him, get out of a bad deal. I saw him renegotiating good deals. I'm seeing the markets do good. Everything that I voted for is happening. The problem is the guy who's doing it's kind of a D-bag, and then it makes a lot of people dislike him. Yeah. I'm still seeing the results that I want to see economically and on the big issues.
Yeah, well, I'm on those issues, but I'm also seeing more civil unrest in the streets, which worries me a little bit.
Again, I'm not going to
you
give
can't
that all
chalk
to.
that all up to him.
Yeah.
But he's definitely a catalyst for this two sides clashing again.
Exactly. He didn't do what Obama did, where anything that Obama said, the Tea Party was just going to be like, well, fuck this guy. But he didn't play into it. He stayed presidential and all that. And I think that when it comes to Donald Trump, you're not campaigning anymore. I don't have no problem with the rallies because he's got his agenda that he wants to get out there, and the media is not helping him do that. So I get it. But picking on people, calling people out, starting fights that you don't need to start, that's what you need to stop
starting
doing.
fights with the Senate Majority Leader?
Don't do that.
What the hell are you doing? Do you want none of your agenda to get passed at all? Like, these people control your success. Yeah. So if you call out John McCain, and if you call out, you may not like them, and that's fine, but they're like, you still have to rely on them, and they can decide to make you a failed president.
Right.
They're going to get reelected because guess what? Every one of us speaking and watching is an idiot that goes to the fucking polls every time Congress is up for election, and we go, well, I hate Congress, but I like my guy, and we reelect these guys all the time.
Yep.
Claire McCaskill will still be senator.
I don't think so. I think the only reason why she won is because Todd Aiken was like, well, rape is fine.
Right, yeah, I know. And let's watch the next
I think there's
Missouri
always a rape
Republican.
comment that
I
takes
know.
down the politics, except Trump.
I know, yeah. Teflon Don.
All I'm saying is I know Missouri Republican senators, politicians, and
Greitens won. I mean, he was pretty
Greitens
hard
won,
line too.
but Greitens was a libertarian until
Yeah, no, I voted for the Libertarian candidate, whatever her name was, Selena, something like that.
But
I can't remember.
He
but
ran as a libertarian, a fake Ted Cruz libertarian, and
Ended up as a very
very right
middle of the road Republican.
right,
Yeah.
because you
He's
say what
pretty-
you have to
everything that
say to
Greitens
get
has
people to vote for you.
Yeah.
Like, duh.
So,
But
again-
Greitens also won too. Nixon wasn't running for re-election. He wasn't running
Right.
against a Democrat, which is the position that any Republican challenging
Well, he was
Claire
running
McCaskill.
Not an established Democrat.
Yeah.
It was
Right,
a-
that's what-
a-
he
both
wasn't-
people were untested.
not a tenured Democrat.
Yeah,
Right,
And then
which-
he had the war, the
which is what
service.
which is
under
what
Yeah,
belt.
which is
Always a
a
good
lot
thing
of
for
people
them
voted
to be
for him.
But
politicians.
that's what any Republican would be fighting against Claire McCaskill.
Right.
She's the incumbent. She's been here. She's got the financial backing. She's got the.
I don't think
the-
she's making it, man. I
don't know with how nasty the attack ads got last year.
I don't like
and
it.
Yeah.
Even
So,
her,
like,
I could see.
I'm not gonna
her
be.
being
I'm
out.
not gonna be sad if she doesn't make it. I don't like her. You know.
I actually
we've-
think she does a lot for the military. she's on a bunch of military head committees and things, and I actually think she does a really good job there. I just hate everything else she does.
Yeah, I don't. When
Yeah,
she talks about my state, I don't. I tune out.
I also don't like I don't like her tactics about like when she comes out and whatnot.
Right.
Because we always our common thing over.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like,
She waits. 3
what's popular
weeks,
opinion? That's my thought.
4.5 weeks from now, she'll come out and be like, "The Klan is bad." Like we determined that. Thank
We got
you.
to that on
Thank
our
you.
own.
Thank you for our.
Thank you, bandwagon.
Right.
So
But going back to Steve Bannon, I think that we gotta get on a side tangent there.
we like to do that.
Yeah, but when it comes to Steve Bannon, I think that we've seen this coming for a long time.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier. Do you think he will still support Trump, or do you think it's going to be an attack on the White House?
I don't know.
now?
I think there's a lot of people going both ways on that. There's the people that work for Breitbart, that a lot of people that work for Breitbart that seem to think that he's about to take on the administration.
I mean,
and then there's-
that's where the quotes came from. It was
Yeah.
the people that were like, "Oh, he's back and it's about to go down."
right.
Now, what I heard was that he's still supporting. Now, Bannon's going to be Bannon. Bannon was always Bannon. He
Right.
always had very
right.
strong
He
views.
brought that agenda.
Yeah, he always had he was a lot of this, no, don't surrender. You've got, let Trump be Trump. You've got these, this is what you need to stand with. He just didn't like Jared Kushner. And so I think Bannon's going to continue to
But
be
that's
Bannon.
the other thing that they're saying too is Kushner. One of the headlines last night was
Really, no one likes Jared Kushner.
Right, but one of the headlines last night was Bannon firing has Kushner's fingerprints on it, which I think is what, if true, is a reasonable thought for why he would go after the administration now. If the Trump family brought me in, used me, and then threw me out, now that's my enemy. And Steve Bannon seems like a petty little man that picks enemies and stays that way.
It's ironic that he was on the cover of Time as the great manipulator 6 months ago and just got fired.
I
Or
never
resigned,
believed it. I never believed the President Bannon and all of that. I thought people gave him way
Here's
more
the
credit.
thing, though.
than-
I do think that it.
Got under Trump's skin a little bit.
No, I think that it was Bannon. I think the reason that we're having the first segment and the argument 2 weeks in a row about white supremacists in America, I think that you can point to Bannon a little bit on that.
Yeah.
I think that Bannon was probably the voice in the ear of the president saying, you need their votes. Like, these
I don't
people have
think so.
legitimate complaints, and I think that
He's
that...
come out against them. And Bannon's...
He
I
came
don't know,
out
he
against
came
them
out and like
in
he
that
was
phone call.
very
He-
happy about the Charlottesville riot.
And just
Well,
because
did you see the full
gleefully-
comments?
just because he came out and called them clowns doesn't mean that's not what, like,
But didn't he
he's
also
using
essentially-
them? So like he probably does think they're clowns. Like
Well,
as
he
long
said
as
it-
as long as he can use them to further his agenda.
Right.
I didn't give a shit
Basically,
about them.
what his comments were was they said, what do you think about the white supremacists and all that? And he said, they're all a joke. Like, there's a very small portion of them. We don't give them the time of day. They're all clowns, all of that. But then he brought up, he goes, but I love it all day if the liberals continue to talk about the race wars and all of that. He goes, that's my bread and butter because we can beat that. And that's where, so is it because
Taken out of context, it is a little. It's
Yeah.
much harsher than he intended.
I think he's
get
doing
that.
exactly what liberals are doing, and they are trying to manipulate the situation to, like, they've been talking about everyone's a Nazi, so now they're taking this. They go, hey, look, everyone's a Nazi. He's taking it to go, oh, well, this is great
No,
because
no.
now they're going to trump up all
I
these
have
things.
for years said that Nazi comparisons are unfair until
You're a real Nazi.
Until you have real Nazis marching.
prefer the
But then
term
again,
white
they are
supremacist.
overreaching,
White
and they're
supremacist.
saying, well, everyone's a Nazi, and this proves it because I actually have seen a Nazi.
Right.
And no, it's still not everyone is a Nazi.
I get that.
So
Um,
I think he's going to come out, and the thing that I heard is that he's going to basically where he disagrees with Trump, he's going to continue to disagree with Trump, but I think he's going to go after the media more now that he doesn't have the oversight committees, he doesn't have everyone. He's going to go after mainstream media, and that's his battle. His
So
battle
he's,
is
he's going to be Fox News now.
he's going to be like Fox suit. He's going to be
It's gonna be
Breitbart back
interesting.
again.
It's
Yeah.
going to be interesting to see Breitbart versus Trump TV if that's what it comes to.
I will buy tickets to that any day.
I
of the
think
week.
they will agree more than disagree.
I think on that note, we'll switch over to another thing that Trump TV is giving Donald Trump credit for, which I don't know if it's necessarily the way to do that. So we'll see.
Kim Jong-un certainly stepping back from the brink after a week of bellicose rhetoric that we have heard. Interesting that he is holding off on those plans that he was threatening to strike Guam with those 4 intermediate range missiles with nuclear warheads. Guam, of course, being a US territory with military bases and Kim Jong-un certainly getting America's attention, but today, through state-based media, KCNA certainly seems to be dialing it back, perhaps heeding the warnings of the president. More recently, the Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, as you say, he said if North Korea was to strike US territory, it would be game on. But Kim Jong-un saying he's going to hold off to wait and see what the foolish and stupid Yankees do.
All right, Kim Jong-un. So
Kim Jong-un.
in my one of my most recent prophecies, we were
Modern day notion.
right. What did I say last week? By the time you hear this episode, that we'll know if Kim Jong-un was going to attack or launch missiles at Guam, which my opinion was no. And guess what? No. And I think that people like conservative media is like touting like this is a victory for Trump.
He talked them down.
Not really. I mean, they were
I don't
always
think
gonna.
so.
Here's the thing, like. Kim Jong-un needs to survive, so you're not going to do something to threaten his survival. If he feels now, what your argument was, I feel like, it doesn't negate your argument of if his survival feels threatened, then
If he runs out of
but
options.
I don't think right now he's out of options.
No, he's not.
So I don't think there was ever going to be anything. You knew Kim Jong-un would.
He still
would
basically
blink.
has China on his side, so he doesn't need to do this.
He
right now.
also, though, what is interesting though, about the way that all played out is while North Korean media is propaganda and they're just feeding their citizens what they want them to hear. Something that is evident is that in that propaganda they were talking big. They had big balls. They were going to shoot missiles at us. They were going to call our bluff. Well, one thing that the media doesn't have to report is the fact that everybody saw that not happen. So everybody in North Korea knows that Kim Jong-un blinked. That's not good for him.
I'm sure they're spinning it.
I'm sure they're spinning it too, but everybody knows. Like,
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
depends on a brainwashed nation.
I also think that it's not as brainwashed. Like I think that there's a percentage, but I would bet that there's a lot of people that go along with shit not to die. Like much like Russia, you let Vladimir Putin score the goal if you're the NHL goalie because you don't want your wife to die of cyanide tea tonight. Like we get it.
Soviet Russia president assassinates
you. Right. So anyway, I don't know. So where do we go next with North Korea?
I think it's stalemate at the moment. I think that's where it needs to be. I think that we still need to be tough on them, and we need to continue trying to get them to get away from their programs and to keep doing things like that. But there's nothing in the immediate future. I don't think that until he does another test and another thing that's going to bring it up again. And of course he will. I give it a month.
I read a really interesting article on foreign policy about how the thing that really helps them is on their building towards nuclear proliferation. But once they get there, it's not really helpful anymore. It's the fear that actually ultimately gets them to be the world.
And that's where their head is. And again,
so I think now that they have them, they're almost like you're either going to shoot them or you're not, and the threat's going to get old after a while because you have the option now.
Right. Well, then once they build that up, then they can start getting more of them, and then they can start negotiating and saying it gives them a big negotiating chip.
We'll take down half our nuclear arms in exchange for this.
It brings them to the table. They are now.
Well, if we're going to be okay with that, that was their plan all along.
I think we have to, and I think relating back to the last little bit, that Steve Bannon probably wasn't wrong in that interview when he said, "Show me a military option that works." I failed to see any option where 10 million Koreans in Seoul don't die in the first 30 minutes, and I think he's right. And I think that was my whole point was. We can talk, we can show our balls all we want to, but the fact of the matter is we can't do anything.
Right. Well, my argument to that is always, people die in war. So once the war starts, then they do die, but that doesn't mean it's not like, oh, people die in war, I guess we won't do it.
There is no way that you're going to get a world leader to be like, well, this is
see it time and time again.
Really? When?
Every war.
When was the most recent time when somebody was like, we're going to let our ally die? So
Syria.
But the numbers don't we
Millions
lost hundreds of thousands,
died.
and Americans, we haven't lost that many in any current war.
Well,
and Syria wasn't our ally.
Under 10,000, I think, for every
it's a
war
lot.
since Vietnam.
Syria wasn't an ally of ours.
Yeah, they were. Obama and Bannon called him a great reformer. He was an ally.
God
Like
damn,
he was at the
Obama,
table,
you
he
were
was
wrong
invited
as
to the
shit
White
about
House
that.
and everything. Like, he
Bashar
was
al-Assad.
I always took that as more of a frenemy, like the way we did
No, they loved
the
him.
80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and then he just decided. Then Arab Spring happened, and he decided that these weren't off the table. And then Obama was like, "Well, they better be off the table." Not really.
Yeah, I don't. Right. I just.
So there's your example.
I just don't see America with the influence that we have in the region being because mostly of South Korea.
Yeah.
Putting them in a position to lose 10 million people and thinking that that's going to be good for us. Like, that's going to make any other ally of ours go, fuck you.
Well, again, it has to be. That's the same thing with America in World War II. We kept saying, "Oh, it's not going to happen." Secretly, we're giving the Allies weapons. We're not technically in the war. Then it provokes an attack, and now we use that as justification. You know, it's the same thing. That's what I think Guam was going to be. Is that was posturing like, do it, see what happens, because now we're justified to go to war and take you out.
But I still debate whether he actually wants to go to war. I think his whole family have been
No, I don't think he does.
political survivors for 3 fathers now, 3 leaders.
I just think that if we trap him, that I mean, look at
if we box him
Venezuela.
in, he's going to come out.
Yeah, look at any country where the economy collapses. There's no food. People are starving. People freak out, and they just and
they'll turn on him, which is why I don't think he wants to go to war with the U.S. Because how far behind is a coup when
Yeah.
people can't get food?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and for that reason, I think people touting victory here on the Trump side should just settle down, because this is what was going to happen.
And there's always
from
escalations,
the
and there's
get-go.
always the night until you know.
I mean, I do think that you're right. I think there's absolutely a stalemate now. But
I just don't like the argument of, well, come on, it's not going to happen, because everyone says that before war, and
absolutely.
every time people
That's
die.
fine. I get that.
I would just counter say it's not for certain it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I would also
I
say
feel like the pieces are being set up.
I would also say that, like, when people say it's not going to happen,
Way to pop your, oh my god, amateur hour.
I think that when people say it's more like the more realistic or the more correct way of saying it would be, it's not going to happen now. The timing isn't
don't
right.
think it's gonna
He's
happen
not
now.
backed into a corner. He's not trapped yet. People are still, like the U.S. are still, and China are still reaching out, trying to solve this diplomatically. So until those countries close in on him and go, nope, this is what you're going to do, I just don't see.
Let me be clear. We're trying to put them in a corner. We're trying to make them desperate. We are trying to get China to get away from them. And once China gets away, they are desperate. That is 90% of their economy. You take that away, and you're going to see a madman, in my opinion. So I think that that's our plan. I don't really
know if that's a great plan.
No, I think that that's a plan coming from that this is inevitable, which I don't 100% side with. I think I can see why people would think that.
Right.
But again, I don't think, unless you're willing to bring them to the table, which we've unequivocally said we're not. Everyone has said we're not. That's why they're not at the table.
Although I think now with nuclear capabilities, they've kind of forced themselves to the table. So we'll see. I mean, again,
They're not there yet,
that depends on if we accept it or not. But I have a feeling, just based on world politics in 2017, we're more likely to accept it than we are to World War.
To go to war.
So
they'd have to strike first.
So on that note, we've talked about the global stuff now. In a second, we'll get into the local stuff.
Senate leaders are looking into ousting a lawmaker from Missouri for a Facebook comment that she made about hoping President Trump would be assassinated. At first, many members were calling on Maria Chappelle-Nadal to resign. They're now looking into the expulsion process if she doesn't quit. Nadal offered this apology for the post.
I posted something on my personal Facebook, and I should not have done that. And for that, I'm sorry for that, but I am not, as I said, going to shy away from what caused that anger at all. I'm not going to shy away from that.
She was saying that the anger was caused by President Trump's comments after last weekend's deadly protests in Charlottesville.
All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and finish up. We'll finish up this week. That was one of the greatest memes I've ever made. I should make that the thumbnail for this episode.
Now, Jimmy.
No, what we should do is a meme that I should never talk about on the show is Nazi Brandon. Nazi Brandon should be the
Right. It would have been appropriate for
That's the
the
new logo.
It won't be, and no one listening to this will see that for months and months and months until this whole thing is blown over.
Do you officially come out as a Nazi?
Right. Right.
NPR.
So obviously, based on the last little bit that you heard, we'll have a quick little debate about some local news here.
It kind of goes into freedom of speech and everything that we kind of touched on a little bit as well.
Right. So Senator Maria Chappelle Nadal from the Missouri State Senate came out on a couple days ago and put out a Facebook post, I guess, that said she hoped that President Trump got assassinated, or that someone assassinates Donald Trump. And, there have been calls on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, for her to step down. She has said that she's not going to step down.
Her exact response to be, "Are you going to step down?" was hell no.
Right. So here's what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think, where do you think you draw the line on, because we all know that we can't threaten the president's life, and so where do you draw the line where this is a threat and this isn't a threat?
Apparently you can. Madonna, Johnny Depp,
Yeah,
no big deal.
I'm thinking like a few years ago, if you'd have had a senator come out and say, "I wish like a
Barack
leader of another
Obama.
country would have been assassinated," like I think they would have been outrageous either way. Like
right.
You're a leader of our country, you can't casually throw off violent references.
It kind of is more casual these days when it comes to Trump. Like
It is,
a lot of people
But
are
I
just
think
saying.
I think Trump made it that way, man.
Yeah.
I really do. Like,
I don't know.
Such a great guy to hate.
The rhetoric has been very, very hateful for a year and a half now. I'm gonna scoot in front of you.
All right.
So I don't know where do you draw the line at what is hateful, and then also do we think that she should?
Is it a fireable offense?
Yeah, I'll put in mind. I think she had every right to say it. I don't agree with her, but I think that she wasn't calling for it. She has apologized. It took her a while, but she did. She came out and said that no, that was heat of the moment. I don't mean it.
Was that
All
hell
of that.
no also heat of the moment?
Yeah, that was after her apology when they said, "Are you going to step down?" She said, "Oh,
okay."
no." But I think that when it comes to her statement, she said, "I hope that he gets assassinated." To me, that's not inciting violence. I think that does fall under free speech. I think that every American has free speech.
You can't lock someone up for wishing.
You can't.
But I think that I don't know.
It came with the same thing with Madonna, where she said,
you're
"I
saying
think about
it's
it."
not okay to yell or to run into a theater and yell fire, but it is okay to run into a
Media outlet.
theater and go, "I hope there's fire."
Well, everyone's gonna be like,
already
"What?
kind of
What are
covered
you
this
talking
with
about?"
the Kathy Griffith thing, where it's like she had the right to do it. They have the right to fire her.
Yeah.
It's a little different because she's a public servant in this case.
And that's where
If the people rise up and say, "We want you gone because of it,"
they would through elections, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Then I think that she should. Should she step down? I don't think so.
I mean, it
think
looks like
that
she might get fired from our lieutenant governor if she doesn't.
Yeah, I think
he'd be in the wrong too.
I think the
that
argument
freedom of
can be
speech
made
goes-
either way, because I think this walks close enough to a gray area, at least when it involves the president, that you're a public servant who has a pulpit, and so if you go out there and say that I hope Donald Trump, it's like this. Look, if I were to look at the camera and say I hope Donald Trump gets assassinated, and then wink at the camera, what does he mean by that?
What do you mean, buddy?
Right. And then if somebody that is habitual listener of the show goes out and assassinates, was it because I insinuated it, or was it because of other feelings they already had? I just think there's a gray area there to where if you're a public servant and if you have a pulpit, and I think that the rules should be the same for Johnny Depp and Madonna. Don't tell millions of people that I hope this happened. I hope he slips on a banana peel.
And we actually saw a very good example of this with Alex Jones and the Pizzagate controversy.
Yeah.
He essentially talked a man into taking a rifle into a public establishment and firing it off, but he was never brought up on charges. I mean, there was liberal murmurs of it, but
So to me, it comes down to I don't think this is very much of a gray area. I think when it comes to what she said, I think that if she would have said, I hope that he gets assassinated, and then someone else came forward and said, yes, we need to do that, and then she said, yeah, I support you.
I need you to
That's
cut
a problem.
this bite. I need you to cut this bite into
I missed it. I don't even know.
We're gonna totally get you into.
Yeah.
You're like, so I hope somebody assassinates him, and then people are like, yeah.
No, don't do it. Then I think she's inciting violence. She said, let's assassinate the president. Then she's inciting violence. I think this is a case where she said something stupid. She immediately realized it. She deleted it. She apologized for it. It didn't incite violence, and she didn't call for it to happen. She said, "I wish." I don't have a. I'm not going to say I don't have a problem with it, but I think that it falls within her rights.
Legally, she can just say that. Yeah.
And I think that we have to defend free speech when it comes apart.
With it,
yeah, and I do disagree, but I think she has the right to say it.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with those points at all. I thought it was definitely an interesting.
No, I'm not voting for her, but
no, like I also think that the lieutenant governor, if he chooses to fire her, that's also his right in his job
description.
Yeah,
because he does have
he
does have the power to do it. So
often politics is just petty.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you could argue that whether or not he should, but it kind of falls on the whole: does Trump have the ability to fire Bob Mueller indirectly?
Yeah.
So, like, if he wanted to exercise it, which he should next week, just to see,
just keep it spicy the whole time.
So it'd be the greatest. Oh my God!
No quiet weeks. Don't do it.
We're always kept on our toes. Like we plan an episode and have to throw it out.
Well, and what's great is I don't even plan them anymore.
Yeah,
like
Friday.
I just wait until Friday, and I'm like, well, all this shit's just.
I mean, full disclosure, I didn't do any research this week because I was just so
in your face.
First of all, it was easy this week to really not do a lot of research because most of the talk this week, not just from our show, but most of the talk everywhere was opinion talk. It was, do you think this should happen, or do you think this is the way it should be? Do you think these are right, or do you think these are...
And as a conservative, I do think that a lot of conservatives were bullied this week. And I think that they were basically kind of shamed, and to where, like we said before, where we have said there is always room for argument. I think the narrative this whole week was, no, there isn't. Say something. Say that there is, and we're gonna shut you down.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why a lot of people, myself included, just didn't do it. Yeah. And now that it's kind of died down a little bit, and we see a little bit of the Washington Post coming out and being like, hey, maybe we shouldn't.
That was a really good article, and that was what in the first segment I referenced it, and I'll post it in the in the sources, but. The Washington Post had a very, very good article, which really they didn't even really have to write, because all they said was, "Hey, we asked the Supreme Court, and this is what they said." And they
those guys, they matter.
And it was actually some really, really good statements. But again, I just think all voices need to be heard.
All voices, even hers, that was saying, hey, because there's a reason for that. Like, she's feeling a certain way. Is it gross and disgusting? Yeah, it is.
Right.
But she felt that way, and I think that she didn't call for violence, and she has the right to express herself, and then she has the right to defend herself as well.
Right, but if she did it with a torch in hand, I would have a problem.
Now I've got a problem. Right. But
so
I think that, and again, I'm good on the Washington Post for writing that article. I think the left needs to do more to talk about the fear tactics, and where, like, if you're walking down the street wearing a Trump hat, you shouldn't be afraid to be attacked.
No.
And that you should be called out for the people who are doing that.
But if you're walking down the street with a Klan hat, it's more believable that you could be attacked.
It is.
I'm not gonna condone those people that do it.
That guy could be an actor in a movie. You don't know.
Right.
But that's crazy to me that we're comparing. It's like when they try to compare the gang violence to cop violence. It's like, you shouldn't have to compare the cops to gangs to make them look good.
Right.
You shouldn't have to compare, but the KKK would get beaten up.
But
one side should have higher standards.
Yeah.
Be careful with the that's what I was gonna say. Be careful with that, because we can start comparing presidents too.
We always do.
So I don't know, but anyway, I think that's
we're all in agreement there, right? That, like, she has the right to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do any of us agree with what she said? I mean, I wouldn't.
No.
I mean, no, I don't.
Not that I heard people say that on a private level, but it's different when you have a soapbox, when you have an outlet to get
right.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where, like, I see where you could look at it as a gray line. I also, as we've determined in the we're all Nazi segments, that, like,
maybe you guys, I'm
that's a soundbite.
We all think that freedom of speech is important,
right.
And if we just give up the right to talk, and if we just give up the right to assemble and the right to speak our minds, then we are giving up what makes us America, really, because there's
Pretty much our number one freedom.
Right. It seems crazy to me that we are at this crossroads where we come in and we have to argue in favor of violence is bad, free speech is good.
Right.
And like that's in some ways controversial to
Yeah.
be like, well, no, guys, we're Americans. Americans have rights, and these are what
On
they
an emotional
entail.
level, I would love to jump on the side that's against Nazis, but
Yeah.
when you just have to step back and think about it from a constitutional standpoint, it becomes a much
Right.
murkier
Once that
picture.
Nazi does his little Nazi sign and it smacks a dude in the face,
yeah.
get him.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah.
Because then he's
But
violent
if they're
and stop
standing there
him.
with a megaphone just shouting their beliefs, yeah, you have the right to do that too. You know?
It's like when we go down to watch the Blues play, and they got a guy sitting there doing his religious speech and whatnot. and you always see him getting hassled. And,
Every concert I've ever been to has been someone outside telling me I'm going to hell.
right, and it's like you don't. And last time we did that, we saw a guy come up and start pushing on him and stuff, and like you don't have the right to do that.
No.
He's got the right to say his
Right.
stuff.
Is he being a little bit of an asshole? Yeah, kind of. I mean, he's got a megaphone.
But
But
again,
he's shouting it into a crowd of
If you
sports
can't-
fans.
If you can't win with words, then your point is moot. If
Right.
you can't defend it with, if you have to resort to hitting somebody, you're essentially saying, "Oh, my
I don't have a good argument.
yeah."
And there are good arguments, so make them.
Yeah,
There is
but again, the
always-
left, I would even say liberals especially, they need to be taking that nonviolent approach of taking that moral high ground.
And they don't want to talk about it too, which really bothers me. They don't want to talk about the corruption during the election. They don't want to talk about the violence after the election. They don't want to talk about the propensity to.
And I mean, I think the right is just
free
as guilty
speech.
of not wanting to talk about their faults. No one wants to point out their own faults, I guess, but it's very natural.
Nobody, I don't think anybody on the right this week is like, you know what we should talk about? Donald Trump's opinion of the Klan. Like, nobody really wants
They tried that once, it didn't go well.
Right.
All right.
So anyway, I think
Anyway.
that's as good a place as any to wrap it up for
see
the
how it
week.
goes.
Right. So we'll
That's fair.
remember to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at TDAP 2017. You can live tweet us during the shows or comment on the Facebook Live. We see all that as it's happening. So we'll shout you out. Thanks, Matt, for your comments
Yep.
this week.
I'm Mitchell Hernandez.
I'm Frank Everhart.
No. We're never doing that again. Because that was
Well,
the
if you
most-
just do it
that-
smooth.
That was the most awkward. No, I just don't like how it sounds. So we're not gonna do that.
Well, I'm still Mitchell Hernandez.
He is Mitchell Hernandez.
That point is true.
Keep in mind that the sources to all of the content that we reference this week will be in the comments section or in the comments of the iTunes episode, Google Play, whatever. It's all in the description of the episodes. We'll try to get this episode up on YouTube too. It'll probably just be cut just raw like it is here on Facebook. So join us Saturdays at noon on Facebook Live. You can see a little bit of the behind the scenes look at how we shoot these episodes. And otherwise I think we'll be back next week. So here it is, your alternative fact of the week. Thanks.
Bye.
One has lynched thousands and thousands of people starting in 1985.